Good morning and welcome to Community Development Block Grants Advisory Committee meeting of April 21st, 2011. Roll call, please.
Committee members: Cornell.
Here.
Markarian is absent. Olivares.
Here.
Sad.
Here.
Chair Sinanian.
Here.
The agenda for the April 21st, 2011 meeting of the CDBG Advisory Committee was posted on Monday, April 18, 2011 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Next item.
Item 2, reports. 2A, receive report on the status of the fiscal year 2011-2012 federal budget.
Mr. Carrillo.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the CDBG Advisory Committee. I wish I had better news to report, but as you may have read in my report and certainly in the news, that the fiscal year 2011, which for us starts July 1st, 2011, has been negotiated and passed with some significant cuts to all federal programs. In terms of the CDBG program, there was a cut of 16.4% in the Community Development Block Grant Program for entitlement cities. Overall, HUD was cut about 20% from fiscal year 10-11. So certainly CDBG to get a little bit less cut than the entire HUD programs, but the cut was certainly very deep and very substantial. Other programs that we know of did get less cuts than the CDBG program. We know the homeless program did not receive any funding cuts, as we know right now. But the issue today, certainly we'll discuss under the action item, is the federal funding cuts, which are now have been signed by the President and are now the funds we will receive. Now, we're estimating this because we don't have a final allocation from HUD. That should come in about 4 to 6 weeks. So these still are rough estimates. We feel that it's probably around 16.4%. So there may be some other adjustments. But right now, based on what has been passed by the Congress and signed by the President, word is that we'll have this cut for fiscal year 2011-12.
Any questions for Mr. Carrillo?
Mr. Carrillo, you mentioned that this is possibly an estimate, and you won't know it in 4 to 6 weeks. Then we're getting close to the July 1st as far as the deadline there. Now, if there is revisions, and it is a little deeper than your preliminary figures you just mentioned, are we going to have another meeting to make the adjustment to compensate in the event that it might be much lower than your estimate here?
Chairman Sinanian, Committee Member Cornell, if I may, this is an estimate that has been given to us directly by HUD, so we feel very confident with the current estimate. Typically, every year, the final letter of commitment of funding is within a couple of $1,000s of the estimate that we've worked with. So we anticipate that this will be the final estimate, or very, very close to it.
And if whatever decision the committee ends up making, we can perhaps word it in such a way that would address any contingencies dealing with the cut being deeper or the cut not being as deep. I don't really foresee a necessity to come back unless the staff tells us to do so. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carrillo. Before we go to the action item, we only have one, right? Can we request that those present in the audience submit cards if they want to speak? So, no one wants to speak? That works. Okay. Well, but I do want to tell you that that will be your only opportunity to speak today. Okay. And everyone's, yes.
Mr. Chair, there won't be public comments at the end of the meeting?
The point is to take the comments now before we deliberate, as opposed to take them after. I guess we could take them, yes,
If I
go
may,
ahead.
there is an item 5, public communications, but that would be for items that are not on the agenda.
Right. And, once deliberations take place and we've made a decision, I'm not sure what good it'll do to our clients or...
Well, that was my concern, is that if the public wants to address
Other issues,
the commission
yeah.
on other issues, that they be
That's
given
fine,
the
we'll open it
opportunity.
up for them. Okay, you have 3 minutes per speaker, and if there's more than one person, it's 5 minutes per group.
It's like we have interested persons.
Early in the morning.
We should go to the, identify the action item, and then we'll take the speakers. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All the items.
Yes, please.
Item 3, action item. At 3A, review and approve revised funding recommendations for the fiscal year 2011-2012 CDBG funding allocation plan by funding category.
Okay.
Miss-
Okay, we have, yes,
Mr. Chair, we do have a brief report by Mr. Carrillo
Okay.
on this action item, because staff does have a recommendation which we'll have Mr. Carrillo expand on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carrillo.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I did prepare just a very brief synopsis of the background, really particularly for this meeting, which, again, I mentioned that there was a significant cut in the CDBG program of 16.4%. That amounts to $584,000 from our fiscal year 10-11 entitlement. However, we had already kind of adjusted this about 3.5%, certainly not enough to cover the whole shortfall. So actually our difference is $458,000. And as I mentioned, that's again an estimate that we certainly are thinking it will come to that around that figure, minus 0.1% above or below. So we have attached to this a new funding plan, which you'll see in the spreadsheet behind it, which really recommendations by staff balances out some of the figures. It balances out, certainly our administration is a cap, so we would stick with the $595,000 for the administration costs for the CDBG program. And the capital improvements, staff has recommended that we reduce one of the projects only from $1.2 million to $970,000. That's on the second page for the Pacific Park artificial turf.
Okay.
And that would balance the capital improvement projects and not have to change any of the pre-designated projects or any of the nonprofit community service projects. We didn't want to make any changes to those because there was a simpler way of balancing the capital improvement projects by reducing one of the park improvement projects, not too significantly, but enough to adjust our capital outlay budget, capital improvement budget. However, the more difficult, more challenging part is the reduction in public social services from what was recommended back in February. There is a $69,000 difference. Our original estimate was $515,000. It is now $446,000, Again, hence the $69,000 difference, which staff certainly we will need to look at what are the alternatives for making adjustments for the shortfall. Staff has looked at this, and we had just some suggestions to get discussion started. One of the suggestions was the options, I should say, would be to fund only existing 2010-2011 projects, which are current ongoing programs, and unfortunately eliminating those programs that are new, and then reducing the shortfall equally amongst all the other agencies, which amounts to about a 7% cut, and that would balance the social service projects. Again, that's just one option. Certainly the committee could look at reducing the entire social service funds by the difference as well. The other is other combinations of funding current projects and maybe some new projects, and then adjusting the amounts. But again, there are options that staff is just presenting that's open to the advisory committee to decide what would be the appropriate recommendations for the council. But it is a challenging year, and we know that we had planned for more monies, but unfortunately the budget didn't work out as we wanted to, and have these options that are available to the committee. And I did attach, again, the projects on here that are funded, and we'll have it on the screen for you to show which are the new projects and which are the new projects and which are existing programs.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could recap very briefly. So the idea is, if we want to take care of all of the existing programs first, and have all of the existing programs minimally impacted, one way of doing that is not fund any new programs. And this is just 1 year that we're unable to fund new programs. And that's assuming all of the existing programs are programs that the advisory committee already feels very comfortable. They've demonstrated that they run effective programs and meet their service levels and are capable of complying with all of these CDBG requirements. If we were to do that, then we would have to cut only 7% more, and the one option to address that would be maybe or possibly all of the existing organizations taking an equal 7% cut. As Mr. Carrillo pointed, for starters, that might be one approach that you consider.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm sure we're on a tight schedule this morning, but I would like at some point to discuss the impact of the cut of $50,000 and the impact of the reduction of the Pacific Park program. I obviously don't think there's anything we can really do about it, but I think it's prudent for it to at least be discussed so we and the public can understand a little bit about what that impact's going to be. So.
This is a CIP project
Yeah.
you talk about? Okay. And just so that we have this, we have the numbers clear, if the cut was to be applied across the board to all the social, public social programs, what would be, percentage-wise, what would be the cut?
Mr. Chair, it will be 13.4%
Okay.
across the board.
And the staff's rationale behind the sort of the first proposal, which is funding the existing programs first, not funding the new programs, and then applying whatever's left over in the cut across the board to the existing programs. The rationale for that is that these are programs that we're familiar with and we're more comfortable with, and therefore it makes sense. Okay. have any questions before we go to roll comments? Mr. Cornell?
Yeah, I have a point of information here and a question for staff. With the revision that we're about to undertake, are we going to have a new public input on this since the last one went last month at Pacific Park? And I'm quite sure most of these people, firms, nonprofits that we made the recommendations for are knowledgeable about the recommendations. And I just a thought, if we have to have another public input after we make the revisions that we're about to undertake right now. And the second one here, is this fixed on the administration, on the entitlement here for the 20%? I noticed each time that I've been around here that we have that 20% figure. Is there any adjustment? Being part of your team here, I know one of the reasons that you got elevated to where your position is that you run an efficient team here as far as your department. And as a result, I was just to this member, if there's any savings that we can make by reducing this a few percentage point and still be able to come out ahead as far as all your administrative cost.
Yes, Mr. Duran?
Chairman Sinanian, Committee Member Cornell, as you can see, before the reductions by the Congress and the President, we were appropriating $687,000 for planning, program management, and oversight or administration. The revised amount with the reduction is $595,000 or a $92,000 reduction for planning, program management, and oversight. HUD allows communities to spend 20% of their entitlement on administration. And I think that's a recognition by HUD on what it takes to perform contract administration and all the responsibilities of developing the plan, monitoring the programs, doing all the contract compliance for social services and capital improvement projects. This also pays for administration of all of our homeless programs, which is a $2.5 million program by itself. So when you couple the $2.5 million in the homeless programs with the $3.5 million in CDBG, it actually comes out to about an 11 or 12% that is being spent on administration or planning and program management, and it's barely enough to maintain the staffing that's required to administer these grant programs. And again, we work with approximately 40 to 45 organizations and projects and agreements throughout the year between the CDBG and homeless programs. So that's what's required to administer these programs.
Mr. Olivares?
Yeah. Mr. Duran, maybe you can speak a little bit to what adjustments you're going to make. I know some of us know this, but I think for the public it would be helpful to tell us what you plan to do to deal with the reduction.
Thank you, Committee Member Olivares and Chairman Sanian. In order to absorb the reduction in administration, we will have to redistribute staff salaries from the CDBG program to the homeless program and to the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act program, which are programs that we are still administering. We are also fortunate that my salary in particular, a much greater percentage of it is now being charged to the general fund as the director of the Community Services and Parks Department, which was a significant relief to the CDBG program and the administration burden. And so with those, primarily with those two redistributions, we'll be able to absorb that reduction.
Okay. Those are all the questions we have. Why don't we open it up to public comment? We have 3 cards now?
Okay.
Yes.
Chair,
Mr. Sack.
I did address the Pacific Park a little bit, and I don't know if we're going to elaborate on that or if
Probably after the...
after the, okay, that's fine.
Okay. So Paula Devine. Good morning.
I figure out if I'm sleepwalking. Am I really here?
Well, we're happy to have you here. Paula.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the Commission on the Status of Women and hoping that you will hold your ground to this program. We're making every effort this year to go to every high school. Start again. Okay. We're making every effort this year to go to each high school to recruit girls for our program. We're going this Friday to Hoover High School to make sure that our classes are completely full. Our program is designed, as you know, to educate and empower young girls, and I think it's working. Last weekend, I spoke at the Association of College and University Women, and I talked about the programs that we have, and I did mention Camp Rosie, of course, because it is one of our signature programs. And after the meeting, one of the women came to me and she said, or 3 of them actually, and they had just interviewed for their major scholarship. And they said the winner is the girl that's being awarded the scholarship is a Camp Rosie grad. And she mentioned it in the interviews, and they said, we didn't know exactly what that was, but now we do, and it's a really good program. I was here at City Council the other night, and there was a group from Rosemont that ran the marathon, and one of our grads was one of those young girls, middle school girl that ran the marathon. And we've also had ex officios graduate from our Camp Rosie and come on to the commission and represent our high schools. So it is a good program. It is empowering girls. And I hope that you will continue to grant us the funds to keep the program going. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions for Ms. Devine? Thank you. Okay. Natalie Camaro.
Good morning. I don't envy your position this morning. I'm Natalie Camaro, Executive Director of Path Achieve Glendale, where we operate a street outreach team that the CDBG funding has supported for many years. Over the years, this funding has been degraded. Federal cuts have necessitated, I think, cutbacks on the local level. So we've gone from having 3 full-time case managers who do street outreach down to 2, with 3 operating during the winter months, which is busier with the winter shelter. If we have another cut, I'm not sure we can sustain full-time year-round 2 outreach case managers. And the timing of this is concerning to me, because in about a week and a half, we're about to conduct a registry where we will be identifying by name people who have been living on the streets of Glendale for quite some time. Is that 3 minutes already? Okay. So the street outreach team has been instrumental in helping us move people from streets into housing. And in fact, in 2009 and 2010, we moved 18 people who'd been living on the streets of Glendale over long periods of time, moved them into permanent housing. We have an 88% success rate with that program. So we very much would like to continue this program. I know you have difficult decisions regarding these funding cuts, but I just want you to keep in mind and know this is what we're planning to do. This is what we would like to do. We've appreciated so much the support of the City of Glendale with these programs and look forward to continuing to do so. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to. Yes.
Mr. Olivares.
What would be the immediate effect to you?
Well, I did just a rough cut. It looked like about a cut of about $5,000. We have one outreach worker who tends to go off in the summer and do other projects. So what might happen is I just have one street outreach worker in the summer months for a month or two, well, probably for about like 2 months, which is places a lot of burden on that staff and would affect our numbers, obviously. We wouldn't be able to get out as much. So I think that would be the immediate effect. Obviously, we would do what we can to fill the gap with private funding, but that's not always a guarantee, so that's what we're looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Luisa Gurjan?
Good morning,
Morning.
members of the committee. I would like to bring to your attention that Armenian Relief Society provides more services than what we report. We do a lot of work, and we have only one person on that grant. And if we are going to have a cut, it's going to be very difficult because the number of clients with this economic situation is growing, and I don't know how we can handle it. Please consider Armenian Relief Society to not cut. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Gurjan? Thank you. These are all the comments we have. Before we, I guess next step is to deliberate, but before we do that, Mr. Sad wanted the Pacific project discussed. It. I don't.
Doesn't have to
It's
be at
not
this
really
point.
impacting
Yeah, we might as
our
well stay-
deliberation, but yeah, at
stay
some
on
point
this
you
right
want
now.
you want it to be voiced. Can we take that after deliberations? Okay. We have a hard task again. Again, we're talking about less money as opposed to more money. And it's a painful choice we have to make, but we have to make some kind of a choice, and whatever choice we make is going to impact someone negatively. That's a given. There's nothing we can do about that. Question is, how do we do it in the most equitable and fair and least painful manner for our clients, the recipients of the funds? The staff has proposed a choice, one option, which is funding, which is basically not funding the new projects, the ones that aren't currently receiving funding. And then whatever's left over, which is approximately 7% cut, allocating that equally, or however it is that we choose to allocate it, across those entities that are receiving funding currently and are seeking funding for the next year. That's one option. Obviously, at least the way I see it, the negative impact or the problem with that is these new programs are basically not being funded. The entities that are thinking of applying in the future may be discouraged from applying again. And some may raise the point that it's unfair because just because they haven't applied for funds last year doesn't mean they should be prejudiced this year and not be funded. The upshot is, of course, if there is any upshot to this at all, that those existing entities that we are familiar with, as was iterated by the staff, are funded at a higher level than they otherwise would be if the cuts were applied across the board. That's one option. Another option, which I think is sort of a logical option, although I'm not going to suggest it's the best one, is just applying the 13.4% or approximately 13.4% cut across the board to everyone. There are some entities up there that are receiving relatively small amounts in the first place, so applying a 13.4% cut would, I assume, impact them greatly. For example, if I look at the Fair Housing Program, which is getting only $8,000, well, at least the recommended amount was $8,000. 13.4% would be significant. And there are others too. Art and Chess After School Program, $10,000. Personal Social Responsibility Character Building Program, $11,000. But nevertheless, it is an option, and again, The reason I would even propose that option, which is the across-the-board cut, is because it's simple. It's, I mean, to some degree it's fair, although I'm sure the entities receiving the money would argue otherwise. A third option, which is, not my favorite, but nevertheless I'm willing to put it up there, is looking at those programs that are directly linked to the city and thinking of cutting them first, cutting funding from them first. Again, just because they're connected to the city doesn't mean that they somehow should be cut, but considering that the funding, the way we receive these funds and the funds are allocated, the city programs take a first cut, and then we're sort of left over with whatever we're left over. It's an option. So having said that, I'll open it up to everyone else. Mr. Sad.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I beg to differ a little bit. I don't think this is going to be a fair and equitable way to do this. I think it's going to hurt some organizations, and that's really not a good thing. So, but I guess I've tried to look at this, what we do, in a kind of an overall observation. And one of the thoughts I've always had is looking at new organizations that come to CDBG and seeing them get in the process and using the CDBG funds to grow their organization. We've heard from two organizations today that talk about taking people and making their lives better so they don't necessarily need to be dependent on public funds. So I guess the thought would be to look at organizations and hope they could be less dependent on public funds so they could grow. So I'm a little bit opposed to cutting the new projects. I do look at another alternative, and that is that we have 3 projects that we funded a greater amount this year than we did the prior year. And those are great projects, and we had very substantial discussions and good reasons for increasing those projects. But they come to about $16,000. So
it would soften the impact.
It would soften the impact. I'd like to discuss that as another alternative.
I agree. I've thought about that also. I think that's not a bad suggestion at all. Mr. Olivares?
I agree with Mr. Sad. I'm not in favor of not funding new projects because over the years we've always, as a committee, we always try to help new organizations. So I concur with that. Given that, I think we ought to first look at the new programs that we're discussing, just so that we know what exactly we're talking about in terms of the new programs that may not be funded, if the committee has to go that route, just so we're aware of it. And then I think we really should look at the different programs and see which ones we feel the strongest about. I'm not for just going across the board,
okay,
because I think the impact on the community is gonna be different. That's my position.
Yes, Mr. Cornell.
Mr. Chair, I pretty much concur with your rationale of what you just presented on these funding here. To take a straight 13.4, I'm against. For the simple reason we have several of these nonprofits, especially some of the speakers who went here, Rose that goes to Washington, the police, so on, that are under 20,000, some 16, some 50. That's a terrific impact on those. Where I would start, as much as I have to agree with my colleague, Mr. Sad, I would like to forego the 3 new firms that we funded in March. Look at on the funding for the increase, I would go back to the level of 10, 11. So it's a straight there. I think there's about 16,000 right there. And then go by case, especially over maybe the ones over 25, 30,000, and maybe apply, which would be more fair and equitable as far as this member goes, and apply that equation. But I'm against right now of going right straight down and applying 13.4 to all the 22 nonprofits that we have here that we funded last time around. So I like to go case by case, pretty much look at the ones that are under 20,000 because they're going to be impacted the most, and go from there.
Okay.
And just to be on the record, for the agencies that we funded more than last year, correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about the after-school program,
That's right.
Club Jam, correct?
That's right.
Loaves and Fishes,
That's correct.
and I believe the zone after-school program, Salvation Army.
That's right.
I think those are the three that we
Yes.
funded more than we did than in the previous years. Okay.
Okay. So let me just express my thoughts on the whole going entity by entity. I think we were ultimately probably going to be forced to do that, but I do want to caution against, we have a limited amount of time, obviously. We can't, go through a full-blown, interview process and all that, and I just hope we're even equipped right now to fully discuss, deeply discuss these entities individually. But to the extent we can, by all means. Okay, so how about this? I think there's an agreement on this point. Those entities that received an increase this year, the increase should be eliminated first. That should be the first step in this process. From what I understand, I heard everyone agree on that. And Mr. Olivares pointed out the three entities that would impact, and the sum is about a little more than $16,000. Yes, Mr. Duran?
Mr. Chair, $16,050. And that would be for the after-school program from Club Jam, which received a $3,025 increase. That would be the Loaves and Fishes homeless program, sponsored by Catholic Charities, who received an increase of $5,000. And the Zone After-School program by the Salvation Army received an increase of $8,025.
Can we agree to do that as the first step? Mr. Olivares?
I do want to mention that the Salvation Army program in our discussions was the one entity that was going to absorb the bulk of the New Horizons problem. And because of that, I would probably not support reducing their funding, because that was probably the most significant program, I think, that we really discussed at length during our deliberation. So I would be okay with the other two, but not with the Salvation Army program.
Fair enough. How about a $3,025 cut from Salvation Army? That way,
sure.
We're still looking at a 30% increase to their funding, but still getting, creating some equity in terms of.
Yeah, I could go on.
Okay. Mr. Cornell, you okay with that? Instead of from the Salvation Army, due to the fact that they are absorbing, or they are supposed to be absorbing the impact from New Horizon,
Yes.
we're going to cut $3,025 as opposed to the entire amount. Yes, Mr. Sad?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cornell has the calculator there, so if you could calculate, compare that to the 13% that we're going to cut, or maybe.
Your passes down, Mr. Senate.
Well, you're the accountant.
He's the CPA here.
You guys can do something else while I'm doing it.
It goes with the territory.
It does, I guess.
It's close to more or less.
A little bit less, $4 less,
$4 less. Well,
13.4.
Well, that was the reason, Mr. Chair, we gave them that increase,
Right.
was the
So it's
impact.
effectively the same amount.
Right. Now, there is a reason for us giving more money to entities, or us keeping entities at the same amount. Every one of these, remember, we went through a process. Every one of these entities was allocated money or not allocated money for a reason. It's not like the other end, if we had more money, we would have given more money to the Salvation Army. So what I'm saying is, although conscious of the fact that they're going to receive the impact from New Horizons, I'm not sure that's enough reason to sort of penalize the other entities more than Salvation Army, just because of the reason that we considered a lot of reasons for making these decisions in the past. So, yes,
Mr. Chair, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Club Jam was given an increase because we had assumed that they were going to be
So here we go.
getting an increase also. So
They were going to be getting some of the
increase in services needed because of New Horizons. So,
right. So and that's generally what I'm trying to say here.
but I just think the philosophy of what I'm why I think we should discuss those, reducing those back and not giving them increases, is just we're asking all the other organizations to take an increase and to
Take a decrease.
Yeah, and to take a decrease,
Right.
and to give an increase that effectively it would appear to be unfair to those unfair to the other organizations that are getting cut.
So your proposal is to go back to the $8,025 cut?
Yes, unfortunately, that is my proposal.
Initially I was okay with just cutting the $3,000, but now looking and seeing that they're actually getting the $13,400 that they would otherwise get anyway, it seems a little unfair to every other group. Again, because, there's a reason these entities were allocated whatever amount they were allocated. So, we can take a vote. It'll be 3-1, and we've been unanimous on these things in the last 3 years, so I hate to do that.
No, let me speak to that because, I've expressed my opinion, but I've always supported the committee. I can see the rationale behind what you're saying. The only reason I was supporting the Salvation Army, that it is that part of town where Club Jam is, and I don't want to belabor the point. If the committee feels that that's the way we want to go, I'll support the committee, of course.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. How about we do this? Why don't we do the full decrease or going back to their original, their current year funding amount for these three entities? And since we are going to go back to these entities individually and consider them, keep in mind Salvation Army specifically. If we can cut from another place, make a deeper cut, we find it fair to do so, and maybe we can help out Salvation Army in return. How about that?
Let's go through.
I would like to ask staff if you've received any calls or comments from the different entities that are expecting to get a cut, other than the ones we heard today.
Mr. Olivares, members of the committee, Mr. Chair, we haven't received too many calls. The agencies here have represented their interests, certainly, but it is a very difficult, challenging issue, but we haven't received any public comment either.
Thank you.
Okay, so can I request that those entities, the three entities that have additional money proposed for this year, be allocated the same amount as they were allocated?
I've already made the change.
You've done that,
to the-
okay, thank you. What's the shortfall?
52,950.
Okay. Can we, at this point then, I guess my understanding was that there was also agreement that we go back to the new entities now and look at them and see how much they were allocated, why they were allocated those monies, what do they do, and see if we want to cut there first before we go to the rest of the recipients.
Can we list those entities? Just
Certainly. Would you like to do that, Ms. Hidalgo, or should I do it? I can do it. It's not a problem. So we're going to go through the list of those entities that are applying for the fiscal year 2011-2012 but haven't otherwise received any funding for the year 2010-2011. And they are
I'd be happy to do that. if
would you do
like.
that, please? Thank
Sure.
you.
Chemical dependency, substance abuse specific clinics. Art and Chess After School Program, Davidian Mariamian Educational Foundation. Bliss Guardian Angels of Trust. Temporary Skilled Worker Center Catholic Charities of Los Angeles. And Character Building Program for Teens, Glendale Unified School District. Those would be all.
Okay. Okay, let's start with the first one. Is that the chemical dependency?
Chemical dependency, substance abuse specific clinics.
And they're receiving $15,000. And if I remember our deliberations and their application correctly, their funding was mainly geared towards providing a continuum of treatment for substance abuse youth. And what was particular about this entity was that they provided that portion of the continuum which currently is not provided in the city otherwise. I don't know if anyone want to add something that I don't remember about this entity.
I think that's
Mr. Chair, was it my recollection that's part of a bigger agency that I believe is out of Los Angeles that is now coming into our community, or maybe not Los Angeles?
I think
but
they were in our community, they just didn't provide the specific
provide this
service.
service.
Yeah.
And if I recall, unless they got this funding, they would not be able to provide that, fill that gap in our community.
I recall the same.
And one further question, are there services provided through the schools? Is that my recollection?
That's how I remember it. Mr. Olivares, do you remember otherwise? I remember them providing the service through the school, or at the school,
At the
at least
school.
at the school, I should say, not through the school. Okay. So your thoughts? Let me ask staff a question first. The $52,950. What's percentage-wise? What is it? What percentage of the total cut is this? Do we know? Mr. Sad, can you use your special skills?
Are we, Mr. Chair, going to then take the organizations we've already cut and give them another cut? Is that what we're thinking about doing?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Can we I just want to see what percentage we have to work with right now. Forget about applying the cut again.
Okay.
Do we, approximately?
The question was regarding the difference.
The difference, we're left with $52,950 shortfall, and what percentage of the total amount is that?
What percentage does that represent of the
What
funds available?
percentage cut if we were to apply it across the board? I'm asking a very crude question because, like Mr. Sad pointed out, most likely we're not going to apply an additional cut to those entities that we've already cut. Yeah, exactly.
Of the new programs, we're really only talking about 3, correct? Talking about chemical dependency, art and chess, and personal and social responsibility?
Yes, although Ms. Hidalgo listed some other ones.
We talk about the personal and social responsibility.
Which one are you looking at?
The third one, we were allotting 11,000. Trying to remember
9%.
specifically what it was.
11.9 is
11.9%.
So we're still left with an 11.9% shortfall. Okay. Okay. So out of the 16,000, only helped us out with about 2%? Really? Yeah. That's
And
disappointing.
that, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And that 11% is if we don't cut the 3 new projects,
Yes.
is that correct?
Correct, yes,
Yes.
with all existing 22 projects.
Okay, do you want to, instead of starting a cut or not starting a cut, look at the other 2 programs that are receiving money this year? Or that are,
The new
Yes.
request.
yeah,
New organization.
recommended to receive money? Okay. Next one is Art and Chess After-School Program, Mariam and Davidian Education Foundation, $10,000. I know that they have applied in the past. I remember from Mr. Olivares probably has seen them quite a few times, but my
I think
first
the
year...
year prior they
Right.
missed the deadline is what happened.
That's exactly how I remember it. And it's a chess program. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
believe there was some additional services besides chess.
Right.
They
I
did
think
do some
they're...
counseling or...
They do much more than just the chess.
Mr. Sad, members of the committee, it's an art and chess, so they have art programs and chess after-school programs.
Are we funding both the art and the chess? So we're funding the after-school program?
Right now, we believe that they're probably going to fund both, have
Okay.
funds for both, but at smaller scale since they've been reduced from previous funding.
And remind us, did they have, is the $10,000 their entire funding for the year, or is this just a portion that they're asking us for?
This is what was recommended. They were actually looking at $34,000, so it's a portion of what was requested.
I guess I didn't ask. Yes, Mr.
Mr. Chair, is your question, do we know what their
Yeah,
organization
what their,
budget is?
yes.
Yeah, what their organization budget is?
My recollection is a much larger budget.
Yeah, CDBG would be a portion of the organizational budget.
Would be a portion of it, okay.
It's
Yeah, their matching sources was about $70,000
Okay.
for the program, so they did have other funding for the program.
Okay. Anyone want to make any comment about that, or should we just move on to the next one?
Move on to the next one.
Move on to the next one.
I'm hitting a blank on the
Yeah.
third one.
Personal and social responsibility character building program for teens. Okay, unless someone can fill in the gap, I have to ask Mr. Carrillo to refresh our memory on this entity.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this one, been looking at number 22. As you can see, it was requested for $22,400, and the committee allocated $11,000 for the program. It is a Glendale Unified School District program,
Okay.
so they are providing matching funds of about $52,000. It's primarily for the staffing, the case manager position for the program, and this is mainly at Daly High School for teens.
Okay, I remember now. All right, well, I think those are the only 3 entities that are new, quote unquote. So where do you want to take it? Hate to do this, but my inclination always is to go with the city program,
Let's,
because they, again, this is a second swipe they're taking at the money, so,
And that would mean which programs?
well, no, I'm talking about specifically about the new programs, so I'm referring to the personal social responsibility program.
So you'll be referring to the 3.
Yes, to the third one.
Not funding the 3.
No, I'm as a starting point,
No,
I'm
understand.
putting it out there. Looking at personal social responsibility program for the cut. Or for a cut. Doesn't have to be the entire amount.
the more I look at this, and with your suggestion of that particular one, I look at chemical dependency, I look at the art and chess program and the personal and social responsibility, and when I put those against the other programs that have been around for a long, long time, and just looking at the programs and what they provide, I would take the position that I would not fund those.
All three of them?
All three of them. I think they'll be back next year, but I think they're also, again, compared to the other ones, I think based on our task, those would probably be the three that I would not fund if we were to do our deliberations again, like as we did in February. So that is my second sort of position here. All of the other programs have been around a long, long time, and we all know what they do, and I just want to minimize the hit on all the existing programs.
Okay, it would be a pretty harsh result for them.
Yeah.
Mr. Sad, your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, I go back to my original thought, is that I have looked at this as the ability to provide organizations with money to get started and to get a foothold into the community. I think they're all providing good services and needed services, and the funding is so small. I just have a philosophical disagreement with not funding them. That being said, if it's the will of the rest of the committee, I'm happy to go along with what we're going to do. But that is my personal thought and my personal hope for what these funds could be used for.
Mr. Cornell?
I pretty much concur with Mr. Saad. It's not easy being up here. It's a painful decision, especially after hearing in the election that we had April 5th on the 8 candidates for the school board, and coming from an education family who was in teaching for 39 years, it is extremely painful. But our first priority, I feel, is to fund the existing programs that we know that we have a good track record on, that stands out, and whose goals have been achieved and that we're familiar with. I concur with Mr. Saad when he mentions that it's very difficult and even painful for this member when we try to reach out and get new blood to come in, go through the bidding process, then after they submit their bidding, only to find out that we have to take painful action that we're doing and delete them. But for my recommendation that I mentioned in my opening statement, I think this is only fair and equitable to have to delete those 3 in order to move on and get on with the reduction.
Okay. But my sentiments are more along the lines of Mr. Sad's. And so I'm going to propose a compromise solution and hear your thoughts on that. I'm still saying let's cut the personal and social responsibility program for the reasons I stated before. And for the reasons that Mr. Sad has so well articulated, I'm proposing cutting chemical dependency in art and chess by 50% or more. If 50 is a problem, but if nothing else, to keep a symbolic amount to encourage other entities to apply in the future, and also to really reward these entities for being brave enough and coming forward. Now, had these entities relied solely on the funding we recommend and we allocate to them, I would not make this suggestion, because we all know that the cost associated with this would make it cost prohibitive. But if they do have outside funding, they're not relying on us completely, this would be, again, like almost a good faith gesture in the city, and at the same time it's money. I'm sure money that could be well spent. So that's my recommendation.
I guess the question I would have with that recommendation is for in the case of one of these art chests, for example, is $5,000. Is it going to make a difference, significant difference one way or the other? And what I mean by that is, will it only $5,000 really be significant enough to make a difference for them? And I don't know, so I'm just asking the question. It is also possible that if we go that route, that maybe if that is the case, some organization cannot function with the little bit of money that they'll get or the reduction, that we may be looking at funds coming back and reallocating those sometime in the future.
And that's why, Mr. Satt, I know you have a, that's why I made the point that both entities, from my memory, have funding, outside funding. They're not relying on our funds solely. So will it really make an impact? To be honest, right now, it's hard to say. I mean, if they were here, we could ask him. But again, that would mean we're opening up, this process to an interview again.
So your suggestion would be to reduce chemical dependency from 15,000 to 7,500.
Right, or we can just go 7,000. Round it up.
Chess from 10 to 5.
Right.
And completely not fund personal and social responsibility, and then the balance spread it across the...
And the balance, we'll take the balance as a next step. I don't have a formula for the balance yet. Yes, Mr. Satt.
Mr. Chair, and I could agree with that. But the substantive question I have is if we only fund $5,000 to Art and Chest, are they going to say, well, it's not worth the compliance with HUD it's going to cost us that or more, and it's not worth it for us to do this. So,
yeah, I guess you're right. Even if they do have outside funding, it costs them more to become compliant. Well, maybe we can ask the staff and they can address that issue. Yes, Mr. Carrillo. Would a small amount like $5,000, would that be a problem with compliance issues in terms of cost effectiveness?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, at this time, it's hard to tell, but based on our experience, and also we have to remember we have the new financial requirements for the audits and the compilations, and that alone sometimes costs $5,000 to do just for the compilation. So, and the new requirements for the reporting. So sometimes, given that small of amount, it's more cost prohibitive administratively to take $5,000 and fundraise the other monies. But I do know that all the agencies, certainly what they have presented as far as availability of funds, is also challenging for them to raise private funds, because it's been difficult with the economy to have enough funding to cover all the expenses. So it's hard to say without asking them, but in our experience, that small grant usually comes back, and it's really challenging to have them do all the extra work for that amount.
Just not worth the effort.
Mr. Satt.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Carrillo, given the financial statement qualification alone, and you have those proposals there, could you briefly look and see if those two organizations were in compliance with the requirement to have audits and that they were timely? Because that will affect my decision. Okay. If we have an organization that has not had an audit and we're going to give them $5,000 and it's going to cost them $5,000 for the audit and then they have to comply with HUD, I'm thinking it's not going to be worth it for them to get the money. So if you could.
Yes, Mr. Satt, members of the committee, I did receive with the proposal for chemical dependency from Pacific Clinics their audit, and that was sufficient. I believe we asked for a more updated one, but they are certainly capable of doing a audit. The D&M agency, I have been working with them to get their financials, get their financial compilations together. I haven't had that yet, but they're working on it. I know they have an accountant that, because they didn't receive CDBG funds last year, they didn't do the CDBG audit as required, but they have in the past done their audits. Again, it is going to be an expense for them to do the compilations and do the audits for to comply. Again, that's the fiscal year 2009-10. So 10, 11 would be another requirement for their audit, but that would really use up a lot of their monies for the
What is
audit.
the cost of an audit?
Depends
Well,
on
the compilation
size of the entity.
runs around $5,000, $3,000 possibly. Mr. Savin,
Mr. Chair, it's the question, how long is a piece of string? People ask how much accounting services or legal services or architectural services cost.
I can tell you that.
But that being said, it's a compilation would probably be in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, and an audit would be no less than $3,000 and probably more than $5,000. So I think that's the kind of cost they're looking at. So an audit of at least $3,000
For a $5,000.
for a $5,000 plus the HUD compliance throws it out of the park.
This just makes me reassure myself that I go back to the same suggestion of, it's not against these particular groups, but for the little money that they would be receiving, I just as soon use it in programs that have been very successful in the past. And
Yes, Mr. Sad.
With my apologies and all that being said, I would withdraw that proposal and accept the staff's requirement to eliminate those three projects, but I do think this process is hopefully helpful for us and the community to show, what the thought process is here.
You meant staff recommendation.
The staff
right?
recommendation, I'm sorry.
Mr. Cornell?
As I said, it's not easy, it's painful. I'm a chess player myself, and one of the reasons that I had this down, that it's a good mind stimulator. When you can focus, see your next move, plan ahead, it's a good thinking process. And that was one of the main reasons that I raised my hand and voted for that. But we're getting down to hard choices right now to make. And it does hurt, particularly this member, and we've seen this in the past up here. One, maybe two occasions, one I'm familiar with, where we had made a funding and it was approved for $5,000, I believe.
Ask.
And it came back. And it came back with regrets that they had to withdraw because their cost was more than what the grant would be here. So I feel that if we can't fund them over 7,500 or so on, that it should be eliminated then.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to make a motion so we can at least get it. I'd like to move that the three agencies, chemical dependency, art and chess, and personal social responsibility, not be funded, and the remaining balance be spread across the board.
We don't have to make a motion, we just
That's a
put up the
recommendation.
numbers, recommendation. I think, yes, Mr. Sad.
To quantify that, as I understand it, we started out with a $69,000 deficit. We eliminated $16,000 of increases, and another $36,000 of new programs is $42,000. So we'd have a $27,000 deficit now. Is that correct? Would you make that?
Yeah, go ahead and do it.
Can you repeat the first part, Mr. Say?
We started out with a $69,000 shortfall. We eliminated $16,000 of increases in programs.
Correct.
And if we eliminate now this $36,000 of new programs, that's $42,000 of our shortfall eliminated, which leaves a balance of $27,000 approximately of
Spread
shortfall
across
remaining to split across the rest of it.
I would definitely support that.
Oh, that's where we're at right now.
16, is it?
Yeah, the shortfall would be $16,950.
What was that again, Harry? What was the shortfall?
The shortfall is $16,950.
Can we, okay, so what percentage of the,
Oh, Mr. Chair,
yes, go ahead.
that's not quite what I figured out, so I must have missed
I'm
something.
so sorry. I eliminated the character building program for teens, Glendale Unified School District. Was that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and I also took out,
Art and chess.
Chess.
that's correct, and the chemical dependency Pacific Clinics.
So that was $36,000 of,
Right. Well, it is 16.
oh, and it's 52, I'm sorry. It is about
It is.
16,000.
Yeah, you're right. She's right.
1,950,
So it is
which
16.
16,000, that's
which leaves approximately 4% to be still taken out.
So 4% of the total amount would have to be. This is 4% of the spent across either all the remaining entities or only those entities that didn't have their increase cut from them.
Mr. Chair, I would propose that it's just among the organizations that already have not been cut. And that would recognize that we recognize that the organizations that we did increase were organizations worthy of getting those increases. And
Okay.
So your proposal then would be to spread the 4% across all the entities except
The three
the
that.
after-school program, Loaves and Fishes, and the zone after-school program.
that's correct.
And
Yes, sir.
I would support that, yeah.
And I support that also.
Not sure how you put that into Excel, but
So somehow we have to figure out a way to
That's a staff problem.
divide up the 4% between all entities except those that we cut in the first round, which were those that received additional funds.
So we have, 22 entries here, and we revised or cut?
We
how
cut
many?
6 of them.
6, so that
so we have
means,
16.
16 then?
Right.
16 that we have to
do we,
make adjustments on that.
So it's 16 divided by 16, it's all about $1,000 a pop. Well, I'm sorry, that's not right.
that's assuming they're all
That's
equal,
not
so-
right, yeah. I think what we're doing is cutting 4%
Of each
of each
allotment.
Exactly.
Of the 16.
So someone, do the math and tell us if that's correct.
It looks about $800 being cut from homeless women and children transitional housing program Door of Hope, which would leave $19,200.
Not that one. That one we're not taking out 4%.
we're not going to take off Club
We're not
Jam.
going to take 4% out of that program.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Club Jam, we're not
Club
going
Jam,
to.
we're not touching.
You're not touching Club
No,
Jam.
we already
we've
did.
already-
We already did.
Nor Salvation Army either. Housing rights, okay. That'd be $320 less. Would leave it at $7,680.
So, we have. See, here's the problem, that the same arguments that were made with respect to those new entities and the audit cost, the cost associated with getting HUD funds. We have the Fair Housing Program, which is now at $7,600. Is that what it is?
Yeah, fair housing, though, over the years, and they've been around a long time, because they're such a big organization, they rely on all the different cities to give them some funding
They
so they can
probably
provide
have
the services.
those
So
audits.
to me, they're the exception.
And Mr. Chair would note that last year we awarded them $8,000, so it's a very small difference this year, so.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if I
Mr.
may,
Ryan.
while Iris is doing the calculations, which will take a few minutes, we can go ahead and address the reduction in the capital improvement category. And the staff recommendation that the Pacific Park Artificial Turf Project absorb that reduction, which amounts to $297,000. The artificial turf project was based on a very rough estimate, and based on that rough estimate was allocated $1,268,000. So we would propose to reduce that allocation to $970,668,000. And once the project is designed and out to bid and bids are received, if we need additional funds or if there's a funding gap, we'll just commit to making up the difference by reprogramming funds from another park project. And that way we don't have to revisit any of the community capital improvement projects, and the balance of the pre-designated projects are pretty much fixed amounts in terms of the code enforcement program, our 2 loan payments to HUD, and the business technical assistance program, and that would make it easy.
More questions, Mr. Sad, about that?
Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, whatever recommendations we finalize today, does this go back to the City Council?
Yes, Committee Member Olivares and Chairman Sinanian, we're planning to go to the City Council on May 3rd, which is a very quick turnaround. That's provided we can get everything in by the end of the day on Monday. So we're going to try. The worst case is we won't be able to go back until May 24th if we don't make May 3rd. We were scheduled to make a report to the council this past Tuesday, with your funding recommendations until the block grant funding was reduced on April 8th. So now we have to go back on May 3rd. And in terms of the additional public comment requirements, Mr. Carrillo?
Mr. Duran, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we do have to at least publish a list of the recommendations for public comment. We don't have to do the public hearing again, but we will publish the revised allocations for public comment, and that will probably be prior to, as we can get to it, the council meeting on May 3rd or May 17th. But we're not required to have a public hearing on it. We could certainly publish a list of recommendations.
Yes, Mr. Duran?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Carrillo, is that how the organizations will find out about the decreases in funding, or will there be calls or letters or emails sent to them advising them of our action at this point?
Yes, Mr. Sad, members of the committee, we will notify the agencies about the revised funding amounts in case they have other comments, and let's say, for example, they say that's just too small and we can't run the program. But more than likely, we'll email them. We did email them about the proposed cuts and this meeting, and again, a few of them are here, but we will let them know of especially the ones that were reduced to, or had to be reduced to 0. We will call them and let them know the reasons, certainly, for that.
Thank you.
I finished making the calculations. We're left with a surplus of $2,152.
Why?
That's
Sorry.
We're over.
Oh, we're over still. Oh, I'm so sorry. A deficit then.
You still have a deficit?
Oh,
of
that's
two-
right, because we didn't cut through with the other ones. We didn't
Maybe
cut
a
the other ones
point.
that were already cut.
Maybe like a 0.1%.
Yeah.
But we can calculate
Oh.
out.
yeah,
If you like us to do that, we can do that
yeah.
with just a decimal in there.
Yeah, it's a pretty difficult calculation
Okay.
without setting up another column. So
Yeah, we can do that
Yeah. yeah,
very easily.
Okay.
Just take the
So-
balance and put it into one of the organizations, right?
Well, no, there's a deficit.
Sorry, it is a deficit.
Oh,
The
deficit.
deficit, yeah. And it's
Coverage. Okay.
part is that we didn't take 4% off Club
Got it.
Jam and Salvation Army and Bulls and Fishes. So it's maybe about a 0.1%.
Okay, so the numbers that are up there are a little higher than they'll end up being,
Slightly higher.
by
slightly, yeah.
0.1% approximately. Okay, these are the recommendations that we've made. Is everyone comfortable with it?
Not comfortable, but I think we're
Well,
all
under the circumstances,
No one is.
Yeah.
No one is.
Yeah.
yes, Mr. Sad.
So can we move to accept this? Okay.
Can I make a suggestion that as part of the motion, if it ends up in 4 to 6 weeks, we find out that there's more funds or less funds, that the additional funds or the whatever has to be taken out be taken out equally in terms of percentage proportion from each one of the entities?
Mr. Chair, we may add to that if any of the organizations say that they're not going to take funding because of the compliance requirements, that we do the same. So
Yes, because, I mean, what are we going to do otherwise? Come back and discuss that all over again? No. Yes, and Mr.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as member of the committee, I just want to make a quick remark that certainly staff feels very challenged with these funding cuts, and it was staff's options to present not necessarily a recommendation but a staff option. But for example, HUD had cut all their newer programs that they didn't fund, that they didn't receive funds last year. So HUD has actually done what we're seeing here. They cut the new programs that they had proposed prior year and had to cut those programs. Secondly, the homeless programs, continuum of care, always emphasize keeping the infrastructure in place before new programs are funded, before new projects are added. So their philosophy is keeping the infrastructure in place first as funding is available. So this is pretty much in line with what HUD is doing on the national level and certainly on the homeless continuum of care. Certainly that was the thought process of the staff that made some options available. So that was certainly committee's very
Thank you.
good decisions to follow.
Does that make you feel better? Anyone?
No.
We don't feel better either. It's very difficult.
So otherwise, Ms. Grout, our action we just took is pretty much what the guidelines of HUD did.
Not just the guidelines, but the approach, right?
It's been the approach of HUD when they did their funding cuts to look at what was proposed. And these were very important programs, such a housing counseling program, which was used, for example, for housing counselor for the foreclosure crisis, and they cut that program. There's the environmental cleanup programs that they had to cut and eliminate. So that was very challenging even at the HUD level to cut, and congressional level, I should say, to cut these programs. But, I'm confident maybe it'll come back. We're looking at fiscal year 2012 now. They're working on the budget for that year, so we hope to have better news next time around.
Keep hoping for the best.
If there's any funding next time around, huh?
just don't say we're behaving like the federal government.
Yeah.
We're on our own.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so do we have a motion? Will Mrs. Hidalgo maybe read a motion into record, or did we articulate what we're moving for, or have we not done that yet?
I think we've done
So we're recommending whatever we're recommending up there.
What is on the screen now minus, we're going to be taking out additional funding evenly. Except the ones that have already been cut, were cut previously. Okay, now it's getting
Those
a little
three
confusing.
entities, right?
Except for the three that we initially cut from. Right.
That's correct.
And we're distributing it equally among the rest, the remaining 2,000,
And that will balance it.
1,152.
If I may,
Yes, go ahead.
just to get it clear,
To help me out.
the recommendation is to not fund chemical dependency, art and chess, and personal and social responsibility. That's one of the items. So, second is to reduce the funding for after-school program down to $36,000. Loaves and Fishes to $42,000, and the Zone After-School Program Salvation Army to $15,000, and the balance to be spread across the board or the remaining organizations.
In a proportional way. percentage-wise. Not equally, but proportionally.
Should the funds go higher or lower?
And should the recommendation from the allocation from the HUD come higher or lower, that mismatch be allocated equally amongst all the recipients of funding.
So that would be the motion or recommendation?
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay, committee members Cornell,
Yes.
Markarian is absent, Olivares,
Yes.
Sad,
Yes.
Chair Sinanian.
Yes. Next item?
Next item is 4, other business.
Do we have other business? We have no other business.
Other business.
Okay.
Next item.
Item 5, public communications. We don't have any cards.
We have none, So,
Item 6, adjournment.
okay. We are adjourned. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I do have an announcement here.
Yes.
On behalf of GHK, Glendale Healthy Kids. They're having their annual Taste of Glendale. If you ever been to one, you know it's a fun time. Good samples, good food, good restaurants, good time all the way around. And they're having it on May 11th. They start a little earlier this time at 5:30, and it goes to 8:30. And if you'd like to participate, get your tickets. Please call GHK, that's Glendale Healthy Kids, at area code 818-548-7931. And I'd be happy to accommodate you and see that you have a fun time on May 11th.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cornell. I think with that, we'll adjourn. Adjourned.